Have you ever thought about, the hidden lives people might be leading? That really stark contrast between someone who seems totally normal on the outside?
Yeah, maybe someone known for being helpful, reliable even.
Exactly. And then underneath there's this chilling darkness looking just below the surface.
It's a really disturbing question, isn't it? And the historical case we're getting into today, from Munich, Germany, it truly embodies that terrifying split.
Absolutely. So, for this deep dive, you've given us quite a bit to work with: articles, historical research, and even summaries pulled, well, directly from old police files, all focused on this one person.
Right. And his horrific actions. Our mission really is to sift through all this information, pull out the key details,
And try to understand, I guess, who this man was behind the crimes, how it all unfolded.
and why the story itself took such a strange path through history. It's quite fascinating in a dark way.
The figure at the center of it all is Johann Eichhorn. He became known infamously as the Beast of Aubing.
And that gap you mentioned between his apparent life and the horrors attributed to him. It's almost unbelievable when you look at the sources.
Okay, so let's start by setting the scene. Who was he before that awful nickname?
Well, the files tell us he was born October 8th, 1906, in Aubing, which is a district of Munich. He was the oldest of 8 children.
And the records mention his family were day laborers, living modestly, but, well, apparently raising the kids with care.
Exactly. So you don't see immediate, obvious red flags in his upbringing, like severe neglect or anything like that.
Right. He finished elementary school, did an apprenticeship as a fitter.
And then worked as a shunter that's like a railway worker for the Deutsche Reichsbahn. And here's that contrast again, right away.
His colleagues saw him how?
Helpful, reliable. That's what the sources say. By all accounts, just a seemingly ordinary working man.
But then, later accounts, especially things he said during his interrogation, they reveal something deeply disturbed.
Oh, absolutely. He made these chilling claims about his relationship with women, said he felt no pleasure from affection, only from violence.
That's deeply unsettling.
And it seems the timeline of his assaults might stretch back much earlier than the murders.
How early are we talking?
Well, the evidence suggests maybe as early as 1928. And there's a horrifying possibility mentioned that his first victims might have been his own 2 sisters.
His own sisters. Wow. That implies this darkness was there for a long, long time.
Long before the documented killings, yes.
Okay, let's unpack his modus operandi, his method. The police files describe him targeting young women, mostly where?
Primarily in the western areas of Munich, it seems.
And how did he approach them? What was the pattern?
He'd use a pistol or a knife to threaten them. Then he would beat them, rape them, and sometimes rob them, too. It was this consistent, brutal pattern of sexual violence.
And this horrifying pattern, it escalated to murder relatively early on, didn't it?
It did. The material details the tragic case of Katharina Schätzl. She was only 16 years old.
16. How did they meet?
At Oktoberfest, actually. October 1931. Just a few days later, he convinced her to go on a bike ride out towards Ebenhausen.
And the attack itself.
It happened near the monastery of Schäfflarn. According to the files, he knocked her down, raped her, and then he strangled her.
Strangled her. And what did he do then?
His disposal of the body adds another layer. He threw her into the Isar River.
Into the river.
Yes. The records note her body later washed up downstream in Grosseselow. That's how the crime was eventually discovered.
Just a horrific start. And the material shows this wasn't an isolated incident. The violence just kept escalating.
Yes, the timeline presented in the sources shows a really disturbing progression. In late 1934, or maybe early 1935, there was another victim attacked while biking, this time in Forstenrieder Park.
And she resisted.
Fiercely, it says. And his response was immediate and brutal. He shot her in the back of the head with his pistol.
God. But there's more in the sources, isn't there? Something particularly horrifying.
There is. The detail that he then dragged her body into some bushes and mutilated her genitalia with an 18-centimeter knife.
That level of sadism.
Right.
It's beyond comprehension.
It really is. And then just a few months later, maybe around September of that same period, another attack. Berta Sauerbeck, a 25-year-old clerk.
The material highlights her resistance too, right?
Intensely, yes.
Yeah.
And again, he shot her in the back of the head. But here's a truly terrifying twist from the records.
What is it?
She survived the initial shot.
She survived. Oh, my God.
Yes. Injured, but alive. And what he did next is one of the most chilling details in these files. He buried her.
Buried her alive.
Under a garbage pit. Knowing she was injured, She subsequently died there. The thought of her final moments, it's just unimaginable.
Absolutely haunts you. Okay, so the sources then mention a shift after he got married in 1935.
That's right. There seems to be a period where, well, he did continue attacking women.
He kept attacking, even married.
Apparently so. But interestingly, no fatalities were recorded during this specific time frame.
And did the sources offer any explanation for that from him?
Yes, and it's deeply disturbing.
Mhm.
He claimed during interrogations that the violent sex he had with his wife allowed him to somehow control his urges, to stop himself from killing.
Wow, that's twisted. And it contradicts what he later said about why he killed, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Another layer of his, well, likely manipulative self-description, perhaps.
But this lull didn't last. The murder started again.
They did. In the summer of 1937, the material details the murder of Rosa Eichhorn. She was a 25-year-old seamstress killed near Germering,
How was she killed?
shot in the back of the head. And here, that specific, horrific mutilation returns.
The general mutilation?
Yes. Post-mortem, the sources state, he then left her body near the road.
And the final known murder victim documented in these files.
That would be Maria Jorg, a 23-year-old domestic servant, killed in the autumn of 1938.
Where was she attacked?
Back in Forst and Raider Park, the same place as that earlier victim. The records just note she met the same fate.
Implying shot in the back of the head as well.
That seems to be the implication, yes.
So this pattern, escalating violence, these specific brutal methods, at least 5 documented murders, dozens and dozens of rapes. How was this monster finally stopped?
Well, it wasn't during a murder or rape, interestingly. The police files pinpoint the date. January 29th, 1939.
What happened?
Passers-by actually saw him. He was attempting to molest a 12-year-old girl.
A 12-year-old. Oh, thank God they saw him.
Yes. They detained him right there on the spot. A seemingly smaller crime, but it's what finally exposed everything else.
An incredibly fortunate intervention. So once he was in custody, what came out during the interrogations?
He confessed. Over several months, while he was in pretrial detention, he admitted to the 5 murders we've discussed.
All 5.
Yes, and the interrogation records also capture this chilling phrase he used to describe himself. He called himself a wild animal.
A wild animal. Given what the files describe, that feels horrifyingly accurate, doesn't it?
It does. And there was a psychological evaluation done, right?
Yes, the material says multiple doctors and psychologists examined him.
And their conclusion. What did they find?
Well, they found him to have average intelligence, but, and this is a direct quote cited in the records, an ethically and morally profound, unfounded, weak-willed, unusually sexually instinctive psychopath who plans his crimes in advance and carries them out in such a manner. A psychopath who plans. That's chilling.
Oh.
Did he give a reason why he killed some victims but apparently spared others, beyond that earlier claim about his wife?
He did. He claimed later that he shot instinctively, only if they resisted him fiercely.
Only if they fought back. Why?
His reasoning was, well, chilling. He said he didn't know what else to do in that moment of fierce resistance, and that once they were dead, they could be fully his.
Fully his. So it was about ultimate control. Resistance triggered lethal violence to maintain that control.
That seems to be the implication from his own words, yes. Profoundly disturbing.
Okay, so from capture and confession, we move to the trial. Where was he tried? What kind of court?
He was tried before a Sondergericht, a special court.
Which was a specific type of court during the Nazi era, right? Known for being quite swift.
And often harsh, yes. That's correct.
And the outcome, the sentence.
Death sentence.
Yeah.
For the 5 murders. And also, significantly, for 90 rapes.
90. So the scale of his attacks documented was just immense.
Truly horrifying. But what's puzzling, and noted in the sources, is that at the trial itself,
Yes.
despite those earlier confessions, he apparently denied the murders.
He denied them after confessing.
Yes, and admitted to only 37 of the rapes, not the 90 he was convicted for, based on earlier admissions and evidence.
Strange. Maybe denial, maybe some attempt at something. What about his family?
The impact was devastating, as you'd expect. His wife divorced him, she changed her family name, moved away with the children, understandably just trying to escape the horror and stigma.
Completely understandable. Are his final days documented?
They are. The sources mention a farewell letter he wrote from prison, late November 1939.
Who was it to?
To his former wife and children. Apparently, he offered apologies and seemed to accept his fate.
And the execution itself?
The date is given, December 1st, 1939. He was executed by guillotine at Stadelheim Prison in Munich.
So a swift, grim end to the story of the Beast of Aubing. But There's this really crucial, almost bizarre twist to the history that the source material highlights, right? The suppression.
Yes, that's a key point. The contemporary press coverage of Eichhorn's crimes was largely, well, suppressed. It wasn't widely reported at the time.
And the reason given in the sources for this suppression.
It points to the Nazi regime. The material suggests, and we need to be clear, we're relaying what the sources suggest here,
Right, just reporting the information.
that it was possibly suppressed due to his membership in the Nazi Party. He joined in 1933.
So the regime potentially didn't want the publicity of a party member being a brutal serial killer.
That's presented as a possible motivation for the state-mandated suppression, yes. It adds this whole other layer of disturbing political context.
And because of this suppression, the case kind of vanished for decades.
Pretty much. It wasn't until much, much later, and we're talking the 21st century, that the case really reemerged.
How did that happen?
The sources explain it was due to a dedicated re-examination of these old police files. Researchers digging back into the archives.
And this rediscovery brought the case back into the public eye.
Yes, and significantly into literature as well. Several authors have written books either about Eichhorn or based on the case.
Like who? Any examples?
Andrea Maria Schenkel's 2007 novel Kaltais is mentioned specifically. It was even adapted into a play. And also Wolfgang Kruger's 2015 book, which looked at Nazi-era serial killers and included Eichhorn.
Wow. So a case deliberately buried, unearthed decades later by research. It's quite the historical journey.
It really is.
Okay, let's try and connect the dots here. We've journeyed through the material, starting with this outwardly ordinary man, the helpful coworker, the husband, the father.
Yeah, and then peeling back the layers to reveal the chilling reality documented in those files. The wild animal, as he called himself.
The perpetrator of dozens, maybe 90, rapes. At least 5 incredibly brutal murders, marked by these specific horrifying methods.
Like the mutilation and burying a victim who was still alive. Just unthinkable brutality.
We've seen that stark contrast between the public face and the predator within, and the strange path his story took.
Right, from being actively suppressed by the state for potentially political reasons.
To its modern rediscovery, thanks to historical investigation and finding its way into books and even plays.
The material you provided really gave us some incredibly specific and frankly disturbing insights. The sheer scale of his crimes.
The details of the methods.
The psychological assessment, his own twisted justifications, and that whole unsettling political context around the suppression. It's a lot to take in.
This deep dive into the sources on Johann Eichhorn, the Beast of Aubing, has been profoundly unsettling, hasn't it?
It really has. We've pulled out these key details to try and understand the man, the sheer scope of his horrific actions, and the strange way his story was almost lost.
It definitely forces you to consider that terrifying gap, between someone's outward appearance and the hidden pathology beneath.
Absolutely. Or maybe the implications when a state actively suppresses information about a killer like this. What does that mean?
Right, for whatever reason they might have had at the time.
Or maybe it just makes you think about the dark nature of violent impulse itself and the twist and justifications people create for doing horrific things.
There is certainly a lot to sit with after exploring all this material. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the sources.